Hey there, fellow knowledge seekers.
Yeah.
Today we're diving deep into this story about a big corporate split that's kind of shaking things up in the tech world.
Yeah.
Western Digital and Sandisk,
Big names.
huge names in data storage, decided to part ways. And we're going to unpack why this happened,
Yeah.
what it means for investors, and what the future might hold.
Yeah, it's really interesting because sometimes breaking up can actually be a really smart move for companies, right? It
Yes.
can unlock a lot of hidden value and allow each of those entities to focus on what they're really good at.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit.
Okay.
Western Digital and Sandisk used to be like this one big, powerful entity
Absolutely.
in data storage. Why split up and what happened right away?
Well, a big player in all of this was Elliott Management, an activist investor.
Yeah.
And now, if you're not familiar with that term, an activist investor is basically a shareholder with a really, really big megaphone.
Oh.
They buy a huge chunk of a company, and then they use their influence to push for changes that they think will make the company more valuable.
So Elliott Management saw something in this whole Western Digital SanDisk combined thing that they thought wasn't really working.
Exactly. They thought that keeping the hard drive business, which Western Digital was really known for, separate from the solid state drive business, which SanDisk was really a leader in, would make both companies more attractive to investors.
Uh,
And they even predicted that this split would make the combined value of both of them even higher.
Interesting. And how did the stock market react to this news? I mean, were they right?
Well, initially it was kind of mixed. Western Digital's stock dipped a little bit. SanDisk's took a bit of a bigger hit.
Okay.
But here's the thing. Despite those initial drops, the combined value of the companies actually did increase after the split.
Wow.
So it looks like Elliott Management was right on the money.
That's a pretty bold move that seems to have paid off.
It did.
It kind of reminds us that sometimes shaking things up a bit can actually lead to better results.
Yeah.
And this also makes me think about today's sponsor, Stonefly. Just like Western Digital and SanDisk are making these changes to try and improve their businesses,
Yeah.
Stonefly is all about providing innovative solutions for your data storage needs.
Absolutely. In a world where data is just growing and growing and growing, having a really reliable and secure way to store all that is absolutely mission critical.
So TrueStonefly provides these turnkey solutions for storage and backup and disaster recovery and even AI storage.
Wow.
So if you're thinking about ways to optimize your data management, maybe get a little more security for a lower cost, I would strongly recommend you reach out to them.
Yeah.
Sales@stonefly.com.
There you.
Easy to remember.
Easy.
So going back to this Western Digital and SanDisk split, while that initial market reaction seemed to be positive, it's still early days. We need to look at how each company is doing on their own
Right.
to really figure out if this split was actually a good move over the long term.
Yeah.
So let's start with SanDisk.
Okay.
What does their financial picture look like now that they're on their own?
Well, it's kind of a mixed bag. They've seen a decline in revenue recently, and they've been struggling with some losses and negative free cash flow for the past couple of years.
Negative free cash flow. That sounds a little concerning. Can you explain what that means for those of us who aren't, financial wizards?
Sure. So think of it this way. Imagine you have a certain amount of money coming in every month, and you have to pay your bills, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Free cash flow is basically what's left over after you've paid all those essential expenses.
Right.
If you're spending more than you're bringing in, you're in a negative situation, which investors don't usually like to see.
So not exactly the rosiest financial picture for SanDisk right now.
True, but it's also important to remember that their CEO is still pretty optimistic.
Okay.
He's projecting that they'll get back to positive cash flow and see some really substantial revenue growth in the next few years.
Yeah.
He thinks they can get to that $10 billion revenue mark,
Wow.
which would be a huge deal.
That would be massive. So there's hope on the horizon, but they definitely have some work to do. And here's where things get even more interesting. Because SanDisk isn't operating in a vacuum. They have a joint venture partner, Kioxia,
Right.
and their very different performances raise a lot of questions.
Absolutely. This is where the story takes a really interesting turn. Kioxia and SanDisk, they're partners in this joint venture that produces NAND flash memory chips,
Okay.
the basic building blocks for solid-state drives, and they both share the output from this venture.
So they're both getting essentially the same raw materials for their SSDs.
Exactly. But here's where it gets a little weird. Kioxia is actually projected to earn way more revenue than SanDisk, even though they're both working with the same chips.
That's really strange. So it suggests that maybe SanDisk isn't using those chips as efficiently as Kioxia.
Yeah.
Could this be something that Elliott Management, the activist investor we talked about earlier, might
Right.
be concerned about?
I wouldn't be surprised if Elliott Management is already looking into this revenue difference. I mean, they're known for doing their homework and finding places where things aren't quite working as well as they could be. It's totally possible that they're digging deep to understand why Kioxia seems to be doing so much better than SanDisk.
So if they find things that could be improved, you think they'll try to get more involved in pushing for changes at SanDisk?
It's definitely a possibility. Remember, activist investors like Elliott Management, they don't just sit back and watch.
Right.
They're proactive about pushing for changes that they think will make the company more valuable.
So they could push for like leadership changes,
Mm,
strategic shifts, or maybe even closer collaboration with Kioxia to close that revenue gap.
absolutely. They might even push SanDisk to focus on specific parts of the market
Okay.
where they
Yeah.
can really use their strengths and make the most profit.
It seems like this split has had this ripple effect, and we're really only starting to see the full impact.
Yeah,
It's a good reminder that in the tech world, standing still is not an option.
right.
You got to be constantly adapting and changing to stay competitive.
I totally agree. The data storage landscape is always shifting. Companies need to be nimble and strategic if they want to thrive.
And speaking of strategic decisions, this feels like a good time to mention our sponsor, Stonefly.
Yeah, for sure.
They really understand how important it is to stay ahead of the game in the data storage world.
Absolutely. Whether you're a big company with mountains of data or just someone who wants to protect their photos and videos, reliable storage is super important.
It's essential, and that's where Stonefly comes in. They offer all sorts of solutions from simple storage to more advanced stuff like backup disaster recovery, even AI storage.
Wow.
And the best part is their solutions are designed to be easy to use. They give you more security, better optimization, all for a lower cost.
That's amazing.
So if you're thinking about ways to make your data storage better, protect your important information, and do it all in a budget-friendly way, reach out to Stonefly at sales@stonefly.com.
Great advice.
They'll be happy to help you out.
Okay, so back to SanDisk. Let's dig a little deeper into what they see for the future. Despite the challenges, their CEO seems to be really optimistic. He thinks they can turn things around and get a lot of revenue growth.
But what's their plan? How do they go from losses and negative free cash flow to hitting that huge $10 billion revenue goal?
Yeah.
What are they focusing on, and what trends are they hoping will help them?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
If we can figure out their roadmap, we'll have a much better idea if their optimism is justified or not.
Okay, so let's dive into SanDisk's strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Where are they putting their money to get all this growth?
Well, based on what we're seeing, it seems like they're focusing on two really big areas in data storage,
Okay,
data centers and artificial intelligence, or AI.
makes sense. Data centers are like the backbone of the internet, right?
Yeah.
Storing tons and tons of information for everybody.
Exactly. And AI is just changing everything so fast,
Yeah,
and it needs so much processing power and storage.
for sure.
SanDisk is really trying to become like the top provider of these enterprise-grade solid-state drives.
Yeah.
You know, the ones that are super fast and reliable and efficient, all those things that are super important for data centers that have to handle just mountains of data and need to process it really quickly.
So they're going after the big players, the companies that are basically driving the whole digital economy.
That's it. And when it comes to AI, they're developing SSDs that are made specifically for AI stuff, able to
Yeah.
work with all those complex algorithms and huge data sets that AI uses.
Sounds like they're really trying to be right there at the front of the AI revolution.
That's definitely the goal. And if they can get a big chunk of that AI storage market, it could really help their revenue grow.
But it's a pretty competitive market out there.
Oh, yeah.
Other big storage companies are also trying to get into the AI world. So what makes SanDisk different? What's their special thing?
That's the big question, right? Can they offer something that nobody else can?
Hmm.
Maybe it's better performance, or they're more reliable, or they have better prices.
Yeah,
It could be a lot of things.
yeah. It'll be interesting to see what they come up with. Those are the things that will really determine if they're successful.
Wow.
And we can't forget about Elliott Management, that activist investor who really pushed for the split.
Right.
You think they'll just sit back and watch, or will they keep trying to make things happen?
It's hard to know for sure.
Yeah.
Elliott Management has a reputation for being really hands-on and focused on getting the most value they can.
Uh-huh.
If they see ways to improve how SanDisk is doing, whether it's changing things internally or making partnerships or even buying other companies, They might jump right in.
So this whole Western Digital and Sandisk story might not be over yet.
Definitely not. This split was really just the beginning.
It really feels like that.
Yeah,
It's a good reminder that in technology, things are always changing.
all the time.
Companies have to be able to adapt and come up with new ideas and be willing to make big changes to stay on top.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive into this world of corporate splits and the stock market and the data storage world, which never seems to slow down.
It's a whirlwind out there.
We've learned about these activist investors and how important it is for companies to have a strategy.
Right.
And of course, the power of these new technologies like AI.
And we can't forget how crucial it is to have reliable and secure storage in this digital age. I mean, whether you're a giant company dealing with terabytes of data or just a regular person who wants to keep their memory safe, having the right storage solution is absolutely essential.
And that's where Stonefly comes in. Our sponsor, Stonefly, is all about providing those cutting-edge storage solutions.
Absolutely.
They have a ton of options, from basic storage to more advanced things like backup disaster recovery, even AI storage. And it's all designed to be super easy to use with top-notch security and optimization features, all for a really good price.
It sounds like a dream.
It kind of is.
Yeah.
If you're looking to step up your data storage game, I would definitely recommend reaching out to Stonefly Sales at stonefly.com. They can totally help you find the perfect solution for what you need.
I'll second that.
And to all our listeners, we'll leave you with this thought. If you were in charge of SanDisk, steering the ship into the future, what would you do next?